Hello, my name is Jim Vieira, and I'm going to speak about perfectly normal stuff today. Fish gods, the seven-headed serpent, and the law of one. Part of my journey of investigating ancient mysteries has been oriented around studying comparative religion, comparative mythology, and kind of my own personal esoteric quest for meaning of the world of time and space and what the hell I'm doing here. And, for me, I find ancient mysteries quite compelling. And a lot of people, I think, share my interest because the story is a metaphysical or spiritual one that eventually leads you down a path of what you would call self-rediscovery. At the end, I'll get into some hardcore metaphysics. And once again, I just want to share my experience and point to these teachings all throughout human history by the greatest enlightened masters, Jesus and Buddha, Muhammad, Yogananda, Lao Tzu, Plato, all these teachers of non-dualism and high esoteric principles. Just like I try to do a comparative analysis and use a multiplicity of sources to weave a story about ancient origins, I do the same around spirituality. It's not like, oh, I conjured this great theory and I'm so smart. It's more, I follow what I see as the truth and I try to articulate it and point to these great spiritual teachers who have taught this throughout history, and their personal experience share that as well as my own. So, I'll start off here giving a little background on myself. I'm a Mason, not a Freemason, but a stonemason, an explorer, a writer at this point. Basically, I just have a really curious mind, and I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions in this world. I feel that our culture, especially from the United States, is exceedingly lame and vapid and empty. I find most people are thoroughly dissatisfied with life, just chasing some lame hits in a materialistic world that never leads anywhere. I think that people are really, I think a zeitgeist is being created where people are just like, what is going on here? Especially in the age of the cell phone where a series of hits is at everybody's fingertips. I got rid of my phone like 6-7 years ago. Limit myself with social media and technology because I just found it much too unnerving and disconcerting. It's just like this series of pathetic hits, so somebody likes my post or, some person I don't even know has a comment for me or something like that. And to me, it's just a desperate attempt, to find meaning and love, out on the movie screen of the world. And that's not what you find it, of course. So, I at one point was an atheist. I'm a recovering Catholic. I was a good altar boy when I grew up. And my parish was embroiled in sex scandals. And if you look at the Catholic Church, essentially just a reprehensible track record. And not to get on my high horse, but I'm going to follow this religion. You know what I mean? Filled with guilt and nonsensical behaviorism and pedophilia. And it's just like, I asked my father when I was younger. I'm like, well, what is this? What are we following, Dad? And he's just like, he's just trying to be a good guy and take his kids to church. And, I was even a pain in the ass and curious-minded at age 8, So, essentially, I believe, like the Buddhists, to judge another is to drink poison, is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to die. So I really don't mean to be critical. I'm just pointing at, the world we find ourselves in and trying to make some judgments about it in a way that, allows you to understand kind of the meaninglessness of a lot of what humans do and the worthlessness of our institutions. It's not to be overly critical. It's just to ask these questions about what the hell is going on here. So I will delve deeper into that as we go along. And, I just ask for an open mind. I try to, I don't share my own, wisdom, just my experience and, the wisdom of the ages, if you will, from these spiritual masters that I've studied from. In fact, I have seen an enlightened master myself, like a real enlightened teacher for about 20 years weekly with my brother. And before that, I had some great spiritual teachers. as well, and I've learned a lot, and it's taught me how to self-reflect in life. And you know, my life now is doing things like creating TV shows for the History Channel, you know, exploring, and basically my brother and I, we do stonework to pay the bills. And if you've ever done shows for any channel, you don't make jack shit for money. So it's just a matter of putting out content that you think is interesting. So I don't really, I'm not tied to like being right or defending my position or, you know, running my mouth all the time, you know, to prove a case, because I don't have an agenda tied up in this. I just think it's interesting and fascinating. So I look into these different subjects, and hopefully other people find them interesting as well. So here's my friend Linus the cat. I have to acknowledge him because he's been with me for quite a while, and he is my official research partner. I'm like a weirdo. In college, my brother and I took in 17 cats that were kind of feral and took care of them for quite a while, and then we kind of split them all up with a series of people and found them good homes. So I've always had cats in my life. So Linus is like the temple priest of Egypt. You know, this whole talk will be, you know, I think, I say this a lot, and I repeat myself a lot, and I don't mean to be, you know, irritating in that fashion, but I think repetition is important with these ideas. And there are people who are going to be like, they come into this life and they just resonate with this. You know, when I was young, I just had these ideas, you know, I saw Easter Island or In Search Of, and it just rang true. And then there's other people that are different developmental steps, and it just, you know, it doesn't suit their fancy at all, and they're like, oh, those are ridiculous ideas. So I'm just going to say that, you know, I assume if you're watching this, you know, we're of kindred minds. One of the ideas is that that has been thrown around for quite a while is that extraterrestrials basically created Homo sapiens, like a blend of like Homo erectus with some aquatic being from another world or something was genetically created, and now that's what we have as Homo sapiens. I'm not against that idea at all. In fact, you know, I was one of the kind of arrogant, dismissive people years ago about this subject, you know, pretending I was so smart. And, you know, so I eat a lot of crow and self-reflect and stop being a hypocrite and say it's entirely reasonable that we were created genetically by another race. In fact, anthropology is totally up in the air at this point. Out of Africa's a mess. The Clovis barrier has been debunked. We really don't know what we thought we knew about human origins. So this book is particularly good if you're interested in the subject. Basically just a scientific evaluation of the evidence by Ellis Silver. So if you haven't read this book and you are interested in this idea, you know, I'd say check it out and make up your mind for yourself. I talk about Edgar Cayce a lot in my talks, and I'm not dogmatic about it. You know, Cayce made mistakes, especially in his predictions about the future, but, you know, I believe that these strange and controversial ideas are generally true about the past when you get into giants and Atlantis and other lost civilizations that I speak of and these mystics speak of. Nobody has a time machine, so we don't know all the details, but I think we really can get a glimpse of the past by bypassing the human ego and looking towards the more esoteric sources. I have friends who are channels and clairvoyants, and I do readings with them, and I listen to them, and I listen, you know, I have friends who are skeptics, and Christians and Mormons, you know, I'm just like, what do you have to say about all these things? But the individual, ego-driven, agenda-driven human, I like to look past and try to get a more esoteric view of our past to hopefully get a clearer picture through comparative analysis. So that being said, I'm going to get a little into what Cayce had to say about my favorite place, Atlantis. So these new finds of hobbits in Indonesia in 2003, Denisovans in the Altai region of Siberia in 2010, the out of Africa theory essentially being in turmoil, Clovis barrier biting the dust. That's the idea that humans came from the land barrier no later than 13,000 years ago, or no earlier than that. The Younger Dryas impact event, which is a cataclysmic event that is being verified further and further by science 12,800 years ago. And then Göbekli Tepe, discovered it in Turkey, 11,600-year-old megalithic temple site that doubles the age of civilization. So this has all happened recently. And these finds are supporting the ideas that many researchers like Andrew Collins, Graham Hancock, and Robert Schoch have talked about for years. Excuse me. So what our friend Cayce in a trance-like state said about Atlantis was that it was founded in 210,000 BC. So his readings describe 3 separate disasters that befell Atlantis. Now Cayce talks about a supernatural founding of Homo sapiens. Like, we are spirit beings who got trapped in matter, and there might be some extraterrestrial influence woven in there. We can't ask him again because he's passed away, but it seems like there is a supernatural creation of Homo sapiens that occurred in the past. So Plato is famous for talking about Atlantis and the Timaeus and the Critias. He also said this, that Egypt has recorded and kept eternally the wisdom of the old times, all coming from time immemorial when gods governed the earth in the dawn of civilization. Now, a lot of these scholars and chroniclers talk about this lost world of Atlantis being, the place of the Hesperides and Hyperborea, where people lived twice as long, and it was a wonderful place where the gods lived. And in Greek mythology, that's the place of the Titans and Atlas and Poseidon. So they're basically talking about this continent in the middle of the Atlantic that existed deep into antiquity. Now, Plato is talking here about his visits to the Library of Alexandria, and how Cayce says that the Atlantean survivors showed up and were the founders of the Egyptian civilization. And it is a quite sophisticated and strange and metaphysically based culture. If you really delve into the Book of the Dead and the oral traditions and esoteric teachings in Egypt, you will find that out as well. So there is literary evidence of Greek individuals visiting Egypt, especially to acquire knowledge, Herodotus and Plato. Both these gentlemen visited the Library of Alexandria, and if the library were standing today, we wouldn't have this conversation because the records would exist of Atlantis. But one of the skeptics' arguments is Plato is the only one who talked about Atlantis as a historical fact, which isn't true. Herodotus lived before Plato and spoke of Atlantis, and other chroniclers did too, including Homer, who talked about Aegygia. So the Library of Alexandria existed in the distant past and was destroyed in a series of fires, which is a bummer. So here is Herodotus, the father of history. Near the salt hill in a mountain named Atlas, after this mountain, these received their names, for they are called Atlanteans. Remember, he was born before Plato. He also refers to the sea beyond the Pillars of Heracles as the Sea of Atlantis. There's a picture of one of the representations of what Atlantis was supposed to look like. One of the skeptics' arguments is there is no way that Atlantis could have existed, or Lemuria in the Pacific. It is not allowed for with current geological theory, plate tectonics, cannot describe these events. But I tend to think that a lot of the pillars of our science are really built on a house of sand, that plate tectonics is a flawed theory. And there's a lot of criticism of these theories. And there's just a prevailing paradigm or like a scientific cult around these ideas, where they are considered an incontrovertible truth the same way as like the science that makes your cell phone work, which just clearly isn't true. It's just an educated guess. So at first it seems like this grand theory, like just like out of Africa. Oh, it makes perfect sense, Clovis barrier, everything fits together. And then these cracks appear, and then these kind of absurd bridge theories are created to hold the whole shitty paradigm up. And some of the bridge theories are absolutely absurd, but there are agenda-invested intellectuals who are like, I've been teaching this for 40 years, or, they view the alternative side as like an enemy in politics and religion. So instead of meeting in the middle and blending science and spirituality like the ancients did, we have these clear divisions of kind of the alternative side and the scientific side. And I say, you meet in the middle. Like, I try to work with really cool professionals, archaeologists on digs, and, people who are just open to these ideas, or at the very least, they're not going to, be disrespectful of how you think. So anyways, David Pratt wrote this really interesting article where he talks about, basically his doubts about plate tectonics. This paper looks at the challenges confronting plate tectonics, the ruling paradigm in the earth sciences. The classical model of thin lithospheric plates moving over global asthenosphere is shown to be impossible. Evidence is presented that appears to contradict continental drift, seafloor spreading, and subduction, and the claim that the ocean crust is relatively young. The problems posed by vertical tectonic movements are reviewed, including evidence for large areas of submerged continental crust in today's oceans. It is concluded that the fundamental tenets of plate tectonics must be wrong, or might be wrong. The way this problem is solved is to take core samples in the middle Atlantic range near the Azores, where Atlantis was supposed to exist, or off the coast of California, where it's clear that like rivers that form these rivulets and other things are submerged deep under the ocean, and see exactly when these areas were submerged. So I'm not against science, I'm just open to new ideas about the past. And I believe with the right funding, this might happen. So we had the cataclysm we spoke of, and basically science is now verifying that this great flood that was talked about, this ancient cataclysm that ended at Atlantis, is actually a scientific fact. We have these creator gods who show up all around the world after the flood as well, creating humans out of clay, just like in Genesis. And here we have Khnum, the androgynous god who created humans, and he has 6 fingers. There are androgynous creator gods found all around the planet. Now I've got into this in more detail in other lectures in the series, but I just want to hit on some of these ideas of who these creator gods were. Cayce says, in the early days of Milius's rule, the separation of the sexes had not yet begun to take place. Though male in their outward aspect, the androgynous sons of God embodied within themselves the nature of both male and female in one person. By turning to the creative forces, they could become channels to bring into being androgynous progeny after their own kind, imbued with a double soul and a double-sex body. In this way, sexual intercourse was unnecessary means of propagation. That's a bummer. But that was the idea, promulgated by Zeus and others, that basically androgynous beings, were the first humans, if you will, these creator gods. The Babylonian expedition, where H.V. Hilprecht says the same thing. Now remember, Cayce's saying this with an 8th grade education in a trance state, given like health readings. He's talking about androgyny. And I even avoided this idea for years. I'm like, it's so weird. It's like, what the hell are people going to think? But anyways, this androgynous nature, this ability to beget out of himself his own ego, this self-existence is inherent in each and every god of the Sumerians. All Sumerian gods are androgynous. And this dude here, Oannes, the fish god who brought knowledge of civilization to the Sumerians, is known to be androgynous. It is not a male, it is like a sexless being, like an amphibious creature who shows up. And this fish god shows up all around the world. I will get into that. So Manly P. Hall was a great mystic and teacher of Freemasonry. Ronald Reagan was one of his students. This is what he has to say. The mythologies of many nations contain accounts of gods who came out of the sea. Certain shamans among the American Indians tell of holy men dressed in birds' feathers and wampum who arose out of the blue waters and instructed them in the arts and crafts. Among the legends of the Chaldeans is that of Oannes, a partly amphibious creature who came out of the sea and taught the savage peoples along the shore to read and write, till the soil, cultivate herbs for healing, study the stars, establish rational forms of government, and become conversant with the sacred mysteries. That's another thing. These gods taught the sacred mystery school teachings that, the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons both claim go back to Atlantis. That's where they say all the teachings came from. There's a lot of intrigue around secret society mysteries and stuff like that, but they've kept alive these sacred mysteries through all these dark ages. And they specifically state that they go all the way back to Atlantis. So these fish gods show up everywhere. Here is Dagon, the Philistine fish god. He has a beard, or it has a beard and breasts. It is portrayed as androgynous. Here's our friend Oannes with his nice man bag right there. The Nommo archetype is from the Dogon people. Now, this is a real key component to the story. Here are the Dogon. Ogamatelli, the shaman, the blind shaman of the Dogon, was interviewed by French anthropologists in the 30s when the French invaded Mali, Africa, and colonized it. And what this Dogon shaman told them was that these androgynous fish beings showed up from the Sirius star system and taught, the arts of civilization and star knowledge to these people. And Robert Temple writes about the star knowledge in the Sirius Mystery. There's a lot been talked about how sophisticated the Dogon were, but this elder, well versed in the oral traditions of his people, basically and specifically states that these fish gods were androgynous and extraterrestrial. So you find them all around the world promulgating this knowledge. Here is a Nommo double-headed statue, male and female, portraying the androgynous nature of these gods. Here is Fuxi Nua, the androgynous fish god of China. Here is from a temple tomb. So you see the androgynous fish god being portrayed. Now this being taught the I Ching, which is an utterly complex divination system, the arts of civilization and cultivation, math and geometry, once again, and we know how sophisticated China is, just like down in ancient Peru, where the androgynous Viracocha shows up, we find, the after effects of these beings, what builds up is these highly sophisticated civilizations. So Olokun, the fish god, androgynous in West Africa, is revered still to this day with festivals. These ancient peoples, whether it's a parade of giants in England or worshiping a fish god in Africa, these more indigenously connected people just remember, like through an ancestral lineage, these ideas, and they just keep going through time because there is some truth, there is a kernel of truth here. So Matsya, Vishnu, they were fish gods in India. They were androgynous, sometimes presented as male and female, but usually represented as an androgynous being with like breasts and beards, or two heads that are male and female. And they are specifically stated as androgynous. So Viracocha, this is the Bennett monolith. I believe it's of Viracocha. He was known to be androgynous. The historical record talks about it. And the Bennett monolith here in the museum, I think in Bolivia, he has, or it has, fish scales all over it, representing this giant fish god, this wisdom keeper. So we know that Viracocha taught the arts of civilization. He emerged from Lake Titicaca, just like Oannes emerged from the Persian Gulf. And you will see that this fish god actually spent his nights sleeping in the Persian Gulf and teaching men by day and taking no food during the day. If I don't get into it here, I got into it in my other talks about these matters, but it is specifically stated. It's not like I conjured this up. I'm just piecing this story together. So Viracocha is a wisdom keeper who shows up who's androgynous. Now, Quetzalcoatl, sometimes it can be conflated, and this may be the same being, but this is the god of the Olmec in the Maya, Quetzalcoatl. He is born of Ometeotl, the androgynous god, and he is a demigod offspring of this androgynous creation. I don't know specifically if he was considered androgynous or if it was, but his dad was. He has a man bag as well, which is very strange because the fish god has that man bag in Samaria on the other side of the planet or the ocean. Zeus also talks about our first state was androgynous in Zeus. That's funny. Plato talks about our first state being androgynous, and Zeus, cut us down the middle and created male and female. Some of the androgynous gods to be found all around the planet are, there's an immense amount. It's an entirely ubiquitous phenomenon. Native American, like the Zuni elders, had shamans who were androgynous. There are androgynous gods in all these cultures. It's just, quite a thing. And I never, like I said, I stayed away from this idea, and now I realize the entire world is littered with androgynous gods and all this mythology around our androgyny being our first state. So I was down in Olmec land, the ancient predecessors of the Maya, who are, in their own right, a very sophisticated culture, and they have an androgynous god, this weird, like, space being, humano asexuado. So there's a lot of two-headed statues that represent androgyny, like the Ayin Ghazal bust from 8200 BC. In the Olmec land, you have these androgynous two-headed statues as well. Once again, you have Quetzalcoatl with the man bag, who is androgynous. So Greek, Sumerian, Babylonian, Laotian, Native American, Maori, Yoruba, Christian, Chinese, Peruvian, and Muslim sources, among others, all claim humans were created out of the clay of the earth in supernatural fashion. So you have this theory all around the world. Here you have the six-fingered androgynous creator god, Khnum, who shows up after the flood, creating humans on a potter's wheel. Now, these could be these ancient stories beyond, 10,000 years ago, but the point is, these beings who are androgynous and oftentimes amphibious are known to have created humans, out of the dust in some form of, it's like the Sumerian creation epic. It's like blood mixed with clay or genetic material mixed with clay somehow created humans. That is the pervasive and specific story all around the world. So the Temple of Esna was dedicated to androgynous, nameless, omnipotent creator god, which manifested itself as both male and the female entity, deity. Here he is creating humans again on the potter's wheel. And there is Thoth writing down how many years this being would live. And as I said before, at the Temple of Esna, this being had 6 fingers. Viracocha, who I just talked about, is also portrayed as a hybrid being oftentimes, or this fish god or birdman. He has 6 toes right there from the German Museum. He's also on a pot from Tiwanaku, 600 BC, with 6 fingers. So Cayce simply compares this type of conception with that of the lowly amoeba, and who pushes out from within itself another separate body, splitting its own gene pool. That's how these androgynous beings were supposed to create or procreate. So we have on Boa Island in Ireland this androgynous god who is male and female, the double-headed statue. You find this all around the world. And as I spoke about before, there are these statues that are portrayed as androgynous everywhere. So Erid Ziffus explores the idea of androgynous created deities in his paper, The First Adam, Androgyny, and the Ayin Ghazal two-headed busts. So these are super ancient statues. In fact, some of the most ancient statues in the world portray polydactylism, 6 fingers and 6 toes associated with the giant of Gath in the Bible, and androgyny. These ancestors or created gods or this ancestor worship is basically identified in androgynous and polydactylous form, as odd as that sounds, but not so odd if the story is actually true. So Ziffer says the following: I would like to suggest that these statues represented mythical ancestors from the dawn of mankind, and that the 2-headed busts among them represent the first human being, the androgynous prototype of humanity. So we have a sober academic basically joining the story through his own personal research. And in fact, I find I read through mountains of academic papers, and I find individually there are academics who they get a part of the story, like, wow, 6 fingers and 6 toes was revered as a divine trait, in this Pueblo community or in Malta in ancient times. And then when you piece it all together, you get this larger picture like I'm trying to portray here. So remember the Nommo double-headed twin statue of their amphibious androgynous god. On the right from Gaziantep, I think about 5000 BC, we have a statue from Turkey that represents that. Catalhayuk in 6500 BC, these super ancient statues are basically, or are definitely portraying androgyny. This is a really interesting one because it might tell us that Göbekli Tepe which is nearly 12,000 years old, is representing on the statues androgyny as well. So at Kilisik, near the town of Arimayan in southeast Anatolia, just over 50 miles away from Göbekli Tepe, a mini T-shaped figure was found in 1965. So this is contemporaneous with Göbekli Tepe. The statue, I think, is like 11,000 years old. So Mark Verhoeven, the academic, in 2001 wrote a paper where he claims this is an androgynous statue. And it, you know, with the vulva, with a penis, you know, with both body parts being portrayed as an androgynous being. So that's important because it hooks up with Göbekli Tepe. I'll show you in a second. So do the T-shapes therefore represent the great ancestor of those who offer the local hunter-gatherer communities the remedy for their proposed catastrophobia in the centuries following the aftermath of the Younger Dryas boundary impact event? Question. I'm sorry, Andrew Collins, I am quoting right here, my friend, who has written extensively about Göbekli Tepe. Genesis of the Gods is one of his books. Andrew, like Graham Hancock, is actually has this mystical prophetic side. You know, he essentially established and predicted that more ancient sites, or the origination point of this current cycle of civilization, would be found in Turkey in his book Angels of from what is it, Ashes to Angels, or Angels to Ashes. Sorry, Andrew. But anyways, I'm giving credit to both these great researchers. You know, just like Hancock went on and on about this lost civilization, then Göbekli Tepe shows up and the Younger Dryas impact shows up. So right here is the Kilisik statue. Here is Navali Chori, which is a little newer than Göbekli Tepe. There is Urfa Man. So all these images here, that's Göbekli Tepe, they're around the same time frame. You know, super ancient sites. That's androgynous. Look at the arms and everything like that. I contend that you find androgyny, not in Urfa Man, but at the two T-shaped pillars. You can see the similarities, the hands around the waist. And my point is, at the very least, there is a statue as old as the oldest temple site on Earth that is displaying androgyny. And then hook that up with Ayin Ghazal and statues around the entire planet, and you're seeing that these creator gods, these androgynous beings, are unbelievably ubiquitous. So in Qumran, after Edgar Cayce died, a couple of years later, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. So Cayce talked about the sons of Belial. He talked about the sons and daughters of the Law of One, this ancient, you know, religion of like selfless service to mankind. And then the sons and daughters of darkness, who created all whacked out hybrid beings, and they were the black sorcerers, you know, alluded to in like Lord of the Rings and you know, epic stories like that. So he talked about Belial over and over again as the son of darkness, leading the dark forces in Atlantis in this ancient wizard's war, if you know, like Harry Potter on steroids. But a large number of references to Belial are evidenced in the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered at Qumran from 1948. In the War of the Sons of Light against the Sons of Darkness, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls says, Belial is the leader of the Sons of Darkness. So Cayce is saying these strange and specific things, once again, in a trance-like state with an 8th grade education, and he's laying out this picture. And then we find the Dead Sea Scrolls, after he's dead, verifies this. In fact, Cayce said that there were female students and initiates into the Essenes, and that wasn't believed either until the Dead Sea Scrolls proved that. He also said that the Nile flowed backwards at one point, which has been proven by science. So Cayce has been prophetically true about a lot of these ideas about the past. So back to the idea of the fish god showing up. We find these fish gods, they're androgynous, they're carrying man bags all around the planet. And I want to point to, over in Mexico, this 7-headed serpent hybrid weirdo with fish scales has a man bag. You know, that's pretty specific. You know, this is beyond coincidence. That's why I do this. I just think it's fascinating to piece this together. I'm like, you tell me there's no story here? You know, that it's just this mundane, you know, story of the past, and none of this mythological garbage means anything? You know, is it like that? I doubt it. You know, and I'll say that the 7-headed figure, 7-headed dragon, 7-headed serpent is found all around the world. And in Siberia recently, this petroglyph was found. I think it's 2000 BC, this seven-headed being. So we know from Sumeria that the goddess slew the seven-headed dragon. That this is a part of what's going on, like I'll show in a second, like King Arthur slays the seven-headed dragon or the seven-headed serpent. There are metaphysical reasons for that, the metaphor of the seven-headed dragon and serpent I will get to in a second. So here, King Arthur, he is slaying the seven-headed dragon. And I will explain what that means in esoteric terms in a minute. Manly P. Hall has this to say: in Indian symbolism, the serpent, especially the great serpent, corroborates other evidence pointing to the presence of the mysteries on the North American continent. The flying serpent is the Atlantean token of the initiate, the seven-headed snake, representing the seven great Atlantean islands, the cities of Cibola, ? And also the seven great prehistoric schools of esoteric philosophy. In Angkor Wat and other places, you have Buddha being protected by the seven serpents. In ancient traditions of many cultures, it is the symbol of wisdom in eternity. In popular Christian lore, it is the symbol of the devil or the fallen angel. In the East, the serpent and the dragon have been the symbols of the sage or the wise man. In Buddhism, according to some traditions, Buddha was protected by nagas or serpents at birth and after his death. That's from Madame Blavatsky. So it's been, the idea of the serpent, has been twisted around in Christian ways. And what it really represents is the chakra system or the energy system of the body, which when you deal with it in a correct way through meditation and other means, can lead to kundalini and enlightenment. So you see the seven-headed serpent here protecting Vishnu and protecting Buddha and on and on and on. Here's Madame Blavatsky, and she has this to say: they are all seven-headed, the dragons and serpents of antiquity, one head for each race, and every head with seven hairs on it, as the allegory has it. The earliest initiates and adepts, or the wise men, for whom it is claimed that they were initiated into the mysteries of nature by the universal mind, represented by the highest angels, were named the serpents of wisdom and dragons, the feathered serpent, Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha. They're all named the serpent. At Chichen Itza with the serpents coming down. The serpent is basically, the path of wisdom in esoteric circles. Even the Aztec fertility goddess, her name, Chicomacotl, is actually translated as the seven serpents. So you see the seven serpents here. So I've showed you examples all around the world of what, the seven-headed serpent or dragon. So once again, it is well beyond coincidence that this would appear everywhere. In fact, the Gnostics have the seven-headed dragon or the seven-headed serpent as part of their philosophy as well. So, when people think of Jesus sometimes, they think of like the fiery Baptist minister that tells you, you're going to burn in hell forever, some Jeff Sessions-like character. And that gives Christianity a bad name. It gives Jesus a bad name because he'd be like the most liberal and open-minded freak walking the streets of anywhere he showed up this day. Somebody who was unconditionally loving. Not that liberals are always unconditionally loving. The point is that he was a humanitarian. He practiced forgiveness. He was like the Buddha, just this perfect example of peace and forgiveness. So he was more oriented to an Eastern way of philosophy rather than a Western one. So this is what Yogananda, the enlightened master, if you ever get a chance, read the autobiography of a yogi if you are interested in what enlightenment means and how to reach it. Jesus went very deep in teachings that appear on the surface to be simple, much deeper than most people understand. That he taught the entire yoga system, the scientific method of union with God, is evidenced in the book of Revelation and the mystery of the seven stars and seven churches and the seven angels and seven golden candlesticks. God realization is attained by opening the seven sails of these centers of spiritual perception to attain mastery over all astral powers of life and death through which the soul ascends to liberation. Actually, there's on Netflix this documentary about Yogananda, and you can see all about his life. He was a true spiritual master. and all these ideas are tied up within, that I'll get into it in a minute, but that there is a quantum field that we are all connected to. We are basically experiencing this game of separation in life here, where we're renting bodies, for a number of years. So here is the seven-headed dragon in the book of Revelation. And interestingly, I was on tour with Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth recently, and I went to the ball court at Chichen Itza, and I was just drawn there, and I was told, to look at all the carvings on the wall. So I was drawn in there, and what I found was, see this being on the right, nailing down, it's the decapitated ball player with 7 serpents coming out of his head. So I went on the other side, and here he is again. 7 serpents coming from his head, and he won the game and got decapitated. And there were some who believe that it wasn't about like this ritual sacrifice, that there was a very esoteric meaning, a metaphysical meaning behind this, which Hunbat's Men talked about. In his book, the great Mayan wisdom keeper, Hunbat's Men, he says, concludes that the Mayan religion was based around a system of 7 energy centers, very similar to the Hindu chakras. He also notes that the Buddha was bitten by a 7-headed serpent at the river of initiation. So basically this philosophy is that there are 7 energy systems in the body, and through meditation and self-reflection, you can activate them to achieve enlightenment. And this is one of Cayce's reading. Entity was in the Atlantean land when there were those activities just prior to the second upheaval. The entity was among the children of the law of one. The highest service an entity may render to the creative energy, and the answer of the divine from within comes in being mindful of the sons and daughters of men, that man may become one with the creative energy, yet no self to be self. And finally, as was given by the law of one during that sojourn, God is within, and the manifestations of his love and his mercy in and among his fellow man may be best known by the acts, deeds, yea, even very thoughts of man as in relationships to his fellow man. So basically what he's saying is, he's not talking about God, sitting in a throne in the sky. He's talking about like a quantum field that we are part of outside of time and space. This unconditional, loving experience that we've basically traded in for our thought experiment of time and space that I will talk about in a second. So Cayce is viewing the holographic nature of reality correctly and saying basically how you treat others is how you treat yourself, because it's a holographic reality. And the great mystics all taught the same thing. And I'm going to point to Richard Casaro, an occultist and researcher who's a friend of mine, who found this God Self icon all around the world. And I say that the 7-headed serpent and the God Self icon are revealing the law of one that was taught in Atlantis, that was survived through esoteric mystery schools and through cultures across the world by these Viracochas. And see right here, Viracocha, like these beings who were androgynous and were the wisdom keepers, showed up and promulgated and spread these esoteric ideas of the law of one. And you find it all around the world. In fact, recently, they just found a God Self icon. The discovery of rock carvings believed to be tens of thousands of years old greatly excited archaeologists who believe they hold clues to a previously unknown civilization. This recently was found in this lost civilization in India. So it's the oldest representation of the God Self icon. So we find that when you study quantum mechanics, you understand what is being said is that the world is basically one big hologram. The universe is a giant brain. It's not in reverse. Consciousness didn't just appear. The bottom line is that, it emerged, as a thought, basically, by us, which seems crazy because we play this game, I'm worthless, I'm small, I'm just going to kick through my life and they're going to throw me in the freaking grave, you know what I mean? Instead of what we are in reality. So, as far as I'm concerned, guys like Jung had it right about the collective unconscious, and to self-reflect and not to look to the world to be a victim of what's going on. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So, as far as I'm concerned, like I said, I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm not a fan of really mindless interaction with people and just talking about freaking nothing, you know, the weather. It's just like, I'd rather hang myself, you know, like looking for a lame hit on Facebook or wherever on social media. I don't want to diss anyone, and I've been like, I've said and done embarrassing things, I'm sure, and I know, and you know, I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just pointing out that I think it's healthy to ask these questions and reflect on, you know, what the hell we are doing in time and space. What is the nature of this place? Like, where is 10 minutes ago? You know, time seems to be a completely synthetic construct. In fact, quantum mechanics tells us it's entirely synthetic, that essentially this is like some virtual reality experience we're having. So if that's the case, like, how do you wake up and get back to reality? The Gnostics would try to seek gnosis or wisdom by reaching through the veil. And Richard Cayce gave me this as well. I'll read this from Plato. You know, all these masters are caught up in the same story, saying the same things, whether it's about human origins or spirituality. We should think of the most authoritative part of our soul as a guardian spirit given by God, living in the summit of the body, which can properly be said to lift us from the earth toward our home in heaven. For we are creatures not of earth, but of heaven, where the soul was first born. So Plato, correctly, I believe, is saying that, you know, our real state isn't in a body. It isn't playing the stupid game of separation. And in fact, it is not identifying with all our stupid personality traits that keep us separate. It's not like you will exist for eternity with all these weird thoughts about yourself and bodily characteristics. That's utterly insane. You know, it is like I said, to become enlightened, you undo all that you think you are, because it is just a game of separation in a body. You know, all these things, oh, I'm really tough and cool, or I'm this, or I'm a Patriots fan, or whatever the hell you think about yourself. There are all these false constructs that you have to undo to re-experience your perfection, not in a body as an enlightened being. So that sounds weird and esoteric. I understand that, but that is what all the masters are teaching. So if you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself. If you want to eliminate the suffering of the world, then eliminate all that is dark and negative in yourself. Truly, the greatest gift you have is to give. Truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that your own self-transformation. Now, Lao Tzu, like Plato and Yogananda, was another enlightened master. They were all teachers of pure non-dualism. And Rumi and Hafiz, if you've ever read them, were enlightened beings as well. If light is in your heart, you will find your way home. You know, it sounds simplistic, but go read some Rumi if you're bummed out these days. And then, if then you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot apprehend God. For like is known by like. Leap clear of all that is corporeal and become eternal. Then you will apprehend God. That's the Hermeticum, this esoteric teaching. It's a heretical idea to the human ego that we are one with God, but that is what all the masters tell us. Once again, not as a stupid body, but as a kind of an interaction of abstract truth outside of time and space. And I will, you know, I could get long-winded, probably already have, about this subject, but I just feel like, you know, I will speak personally. I've studied pure non-dualism, a thought system called The Course in Miracles, for about 25 years. And my buddy Gary Renard has written a series of books that explains what every question about time and space, why you're here, is answered within this book. It is described in intricate, holographic, uncompromising detail. And the reality that I believe is like the prodigal sons and daughters, that the world of time and space is kind of this virtual reality experiment where it's like, hey, what would it be like to be separate bodies or to create like God? And you could say, I'm going to make life a grand adventure and this is cool. Or you could say, this place kind of blows, you know, like my parents died, you know, I tore my hamstring and you know, my cat's sick or whatever. Like, life can really suck. And it's like, is it a worthwhile experience? Not that you don't want to be loving and make a better world, but is this a place you want to hang on to? You really got to ask yourself that, you know? Or you want to unravel your false self and get back home. That's what I want to do. I'm like, you know, I do the best I can. I try to be kind and respectful and helpful. But the bottom line is, you know, this place blows a lot too. You know, there's a lot of struggle and turmoil. It's just the way it is. So my boy Gary Renard lays it out. And he is just reflecting on the teachings of non-dualism all throughout the ages, all the greatest masters, and their lives revealed this. It wasn't like they were talking shit and then living a different life. They were basically tuned in, like Muji, if you YouTube his videos or watch Yogananda. They were these unbelievably compassionate, peaceful, incredible beings. And, you know, it's basically something to try to emulate, I believe. Because if not, you know, time comes and goes. There's 10 years like that. Oh, Jim, oh, he's a great guy. He's dead. You know what I mean? It's like you want to wake up to what we really are. And if this rings true, read this book. Like I said, my brother and I have been at this for like 25 years. We get together early in the morning and talk basically in these non-dualistic terms about the nature of reality for about an hour before we go off and do stonework and stuff. And, you know, I just like to share my experience because there's a lot of people without a lot of hope and they feel like, oh, you know, this life sucks and I want something better. And I would say, pick that book up. Gary's going to have to give me some proceeds if anybody buys it. So I appreciate you listening to this. I understand these are some strange and mind-bending ideas, but a lot of them, you know, they're backed up by quantum mechanics and great spiritual teachers, and I'm claiming no fake authority myself as a, you know, somebody who's in the fight with everyone else. I'm just trying to share information that I find interesting. So thank you for your time and be well.